Have you ever been in a room full of people, laughter echoing all around, yet felt as if you were invisible? That quiet emptiness inside, loneliness, doesn't come from the absence of people, it comes from the absence of connection. Have you ever sat in a crowded cafe, music playing, conversations buzzing, people moving about with their coffees in hand, and still felt an ache inside that no one could see? That ache is loneliness. And what's surprising is this: loneliness doesn't disappear just because people are nearby. The human heart doesn't measure company by numbers, it measures by depth. You could be standing shoulder to shoulder with 1,000 people, and yet, if no one truly sees you, hears you, or understands you, the silence within feels louder than all the noise around you. This is the illusion of presence. We assume that proximity equals connection. We believe that being surrounded by people should protect us from loneliness, but it doesn't. Why? Because presence without connection is like food without nourishment. You can eat all you want, but if the body doesn't absorb the nutrients, you remain hungry. The same goes for the soul. It craves nourishment through understanding, intimacy, and belonging, not just faces in a room. Think about it. How many times have you smiled politely in conversation, nodding at the right moments, while inside, your mind wandered into that hollow space that whispers, "They don't really know me"? You laughed at the joke, you agreed with the story, but when you walked away, you felt no closer to that person than before the conversation began. The illusion was there. You were together, but the connection wasn't. And without connection, presence is just geography. This illusion has grown even stronger in our modern world. Social gatherings, workplace meetings, endless social media feeds, they give us the sense that we're constantly with people. But this digital presence often lacks weight. 100 likes on your photo might give you a momentary spark, but can it compare to one genuine hug? 1,000 followers may know your name, but do they know your fears, your dreams, your struggles? Loneliness persists because we confuse being seen with being known. The two are not the same. At the core, the illusion of presence teaches us something profound. Connection is not about how many, it is about how deeply. One authentic bond can heal more loneliness than 100 shallow interactions. One conversation where you feel safe enough to say, "I'm not okay today," can carry more weight than a dozen conversations about the weather. Yet most of us settle for the surface, afraid to go deeper. We let the illusion keep us comfortable because comfort feels safer than vulnerability, but what's safe often keeps us lonely. So, the next time you find yourself in a room full of people and that emptiness begins to rise, ask yourself, am I truly connecting, or am I just surrounded? Because there's a difference between being with people and being with people. The first is about space, the second is about soul. One fills your time, the other fills your heart, and until we learn to look beyond the illusion, we'll continue to confuse company with connection, and wonder why, even in the busiest places, we still feel alone. Loneliness often hides behind the faces of others, but its roots usually lie within us. It's tempting to believe that if we just had more friends, more conversations, more invitations, then the emptiness would fade. But here's the difficult truth. Even if the whole world gathered around you, if you are disconnected from yourself, loneliness would still find you. Imagine carrying a phone everywhere, but never charging it. You hold it, you touch it, you scroll on it, but eventually, without power, it becomes useless. Our inner world works the same way. If we never recharge ourselves through reflection, acceptance, and self-understanding, we become like that phone, present, visible, surrounded by activity, but empty of energy inside. The disconnect from ourselves makes external connections feel hollow, no matter how many people try to plug into us. Think for a moment about how well you truly know yourself. not the version you present on social media, not the version your colleagues see at work, not even the version your family expects you to be. I'm talking about the raw, unfiltered self, the self that feels fear at night, the self that carries secret disappointments, the self that dreams of something bigger but hesitates to reach for it. Many of us spend so much time curating who we should be that we lose touch with who we are. And when that happens, even when others try to connect, they can only meet the mask, not the person behind it. Masks attract attention, but they don't build connection. This inner disconnect also shows up as constant self-criticism. If you've ever sat with yourself and thought, "I'm not good enough, I don't deserve love, I'm always failing," then you've felt the weight of a mind turned against itself. And here's the paradox. When we reject ourselves, we unconsciously expect others to reject us too. So even if someone offers us kindness, we doubt it. If they praise us, we question their sincerity. If they stay, we fear they'll leave. That inner fracture keeps loneliness alive, no matter how much external love surrounds us. Let's be honest, spending time alone scares many people. Silence is uncomfortable because in silence we meet ourselves. And sometimes we don't like what we find. That's why so many drown themselves in noise, constant streaming, endless scrolling, perpetual busyness, anything to avoid sitting with their own thoughts. But here's the irony. By running from ourselves, we run straight into loneliness. Because loneliness isn't just the absence of others. It's also the absence of peace with ourselves. The path forward begins not with chasing people, but with returning inward. It's learning to sit quietly with your own mind and say, "I hear you, I accept you." It's journaling your thoughts without judgment. It's allowing your emotions to surface, not burying them under distraction. It's reminding yourself that you are not broken, you are simply human. And when you build that bridge back to yourself, something shifts. Conversations feel easier, friendships deepen, love feels more believable. Why? Because others can only connect with you to the extent that you connect with yourself. So, the next time loneliness creeps in, don't immediately look outward and say, "I need more people." Pause. Look inward and ask, am I connected to myself? Do I understand me? Do I accept me? Because loneliness doesn't just vanish when the room gets crowded. It begins to fade when the heart gets quiet enough to finally meet itself. There's a quiet thief that steals joy, connection, and peace from almost everyone in this modern age. It's not always obvious, and it doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shows up as a small thought, a subtle doubt, a quick glance at someone else's life. This thief is comparison. And if you've ever scrolled through your phone at night, staring at someone else's pictures, achievements, or lifestyle, and suddenly felt a little smaller, a little less worthy, you felt its weight. Comparison creates distance where there should be closeness. Instead of seeing others as fellow travelers on the same human journey, we see them as competitors. Their success becomes our failure. Their happiness becomes our emptiness. And slowly a wall is built, not because they pushed us away, but because we pushed ourselves down. The tragedy is that this wall not only separates us from others, it also separates us from genuine connection. Because how can we reach out to people if, deep down, we feel inferior to them? Social media has turned comparison into a daily ritual. One swipe and we see the smiling family, the dream vacation, the perfect relationship, the flawless body, the big house, the shiny car. What we forget, though, is that these are highlights, not full stories. Nobody posts their sleepless nights, their fights behind closed doors, their hidden struggles, their quiet fears. We compare our behind, the scenes to someone else's edited highlight reel. No wonder loneliness grows. We start believing we're the only ones living an unpolished life, but comparison doesn't just happen online. It happens in classrooms, offices, families, even friendships. A student compares grades, an employee compares promotions, a parent compares children, a friend compares achievements, and in every comparison, we either crown ourselves or condemn ourselves. If we feel superior, we distance ourselves out of pride. If we feel inferior, we withdraw out of shame. Either way, connection suffers and loneliness deepens. Here's something to consider. Comparison is not always about envy. Sometimes it's about longing. When you see someone else's life and feel a sting inside, it's not always because you resent them. Often, it's because you see in them something you desire. Instead of letting that sting turn into jealousy, we can let it turn into curiosity. What is it that I truly long for? Is it love? Is it freedom? Is it creativity? Is it recognition? Comparison can become a mirror showing us what we want, rather than a prison chaining us to what we lack. But the danger is this. When comparison becomes constant, it convinces us that we're never enough. And when we believe we're never enough, loneliness follows. Because if you think you're unworthy, you stop reaching for connection. You stop opening up, you stop trusting, you tell yourself, why would they want me when they could have someone better? And slowly, without realizing, you isolate yourself, not because others rejected you, but because comparison told you to reject yourself. So how do we lighten this weight? The answer isn't to stop noticing others. It's to change the way we notice. Instead of comparing, we can celebrate. Instead of saying, they have what I don't, we can say, they have what's possible. Instead of shrinking when we see beauty, success, or joy in others, we can expand by allowing it to inspire us. When someone else shines, it doesn't dim your light. It reminds you that light is possible. And when we release comparison, connection becomes easier. We no longer see people as threats to our worth, but as companions in our shared humanity. We begin to open our hearts, not out of competition, but out of compassion. We listen more, we share more honestly, we feel less afraid of not measuring up, because finally we realize there was no measuring stick to begin with. The weight of comparison is heavy, but it's a weight we don't have to carry. The moment we put it down, we find that connection. The very thing loneliness steals from us was never gone. It was just hidden beneath the burden of believing we had to be like someone else to deserve it. When we think about connection, most of us imagine speaking, sharing our stories, expressing our feelings, telling people who we are. But here's the paradox: the deepest connections are not built by speaking. They are built by listening, true listening, the kind where you set aside your own thoughts, your judgments, your desire to respond, has become one of the rarest and most forgotten skills of our time, and yet it may be the very key to dissolving loneliness. Consider how most conversations unfold. Someone speaks, and while they're speaking, the other person is already preparing a response. Maybe they're waiting for a pause to jump in with their own story, their own opinion, or their own advice. On the surface, it looks like communication, but beneath it, something crucial is missing: presence. We don't feel heard because the other person isn't fully with us. They're half in our words, half in their own. And when presence is missing, connection is missing. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine sitting across from someone who isn't rushing to reply, who isn't distracted, who isn't secretly checking their phone under the table. They're leaning in, their eyes are steady, their silence is not empty but attentive. They don't just hear your words, they absorb them. They listen not to answer but to understand. How does that feel? For many, it feels rare. It feels almost sacred, because in that moment, you don't just exist, you matter. The forgotten skill of listening matters because loneliness is not always about physical solitude. Often, loneliness is about feeling unseen. You could tell your story 100 times, but if no one truly listens, it's as if you never told it at all. And the more unheard we feel, the deeper the loneliness grows. Sometimes, what we need is not advice, not solutions, not even encouragement. Sometimes, all we need is for someone to hold space for our words without judgment, without interruption. But listening is more than just an act of kindness toward others. It's also a pathway to self-discovery. When we practice listening deeply to others, we learn to listen more deeply to ourselves. We begin to notice the quiet signals our body gives us, the emotions we often suppress, the needs we tend to ignore. Loneliness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through fatigue, through restlessness, through that strange ache in the chest at night, and if we don't listen, to others or to ourselves, those whispers turn into walls that separate us from connection. One reason listening is so difficult today is the speed of our world. Everything urges us to move faster. Scroll, reply, react, perform. We fear silence in conversations because silence feels awkward. But silence is where listening grows. Silence gives space for words to sink in, for emotions to unfold, for meaning to emerge. When we remove silence, we remove depth. That's why so many conversations today skim the surface. They pass the time but don't touch the soul. To truly listen, we must slow down. We must put aside the urge to fix or to prove. We must let go of the belief that connection is about how well we talk. Instead, connection is about how well we hear. And here's the beautiful truth. When we give someone else the gift of listening, loneliness softens for both of us. Because the act of listening says, without words, you are not alone. I am here. Your story matters. So perhaps the cure for much of our loneliness is not more conversations, but better conversations. Not louder voices, but quieter ears. Not more impressive words, but more genuine presence. In a world where everyone is speaking, the one who listens becomes a sanctuary. And in that sanctuary, connection is born. Why do so many of us feel lonely even when we want to connect? One reason is that we keep our walls high. We wear masks. We show the world only what feels safe, the smile, the achievements, the small talk, the I'm fine. But underneath, we carry fears, doubts, pain, and longings that rarely see the light. And here lies the paradox. We crave connection, yet we hide the very parts of ourselves that would create it. Vulnerability is the bridge between isolation and intimacy. Think about your closest relationships, the people you trust most. What makes them close? It's not just shared experiences or time spent together. It's that, at some point, you let your guard down. You admitted you were struggling. You revealed a fear. You exposed a dream that scared you, and they didn't turn away. Instead, they drew closer. That moment, raw, unpolished, human, built a connection stronger than years of polite conversations ever could. But vulnerability requires courage because it carries risk. When you open your heart, you invite not only acceptance but also rejection. You risk being misunderstood. You risk being judged. And for many, those risks feel unbearable. So we stay silent, convincing ourselves it's safer to hide. Yet safety and loneliness often walk hand in hand, because the more we protect ourselves from hurt, the more we protect ourselves from love. Consider a simple example. You're going through a hard time, but when a friend asks, "How are you?" you say, "I'm good." The conversation moves on. You protected yourself from the chance of looking weak, but you also robbed yourself of the chance to be comforted. Multiply that by hundreds of interactions, and you see why loneliness grows. We crave understanding, yet we answer with masks. There's a powerful truth here. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with honesty. Have you ever noticed that when someone admits their flaws or failures, you don't think less of them? You actually respect them more. Vulnerability doesn't push people away. It pulls them in. It says, I trust you enough to show you the real me. And that trust creates safety, not distance. The irony is that we all long for others to be vulnerable with us, yet we hesitate to go first. We wait for someone else to open up, someone else to take the risk. But connection deepens when we choose to be the first to step forward. It doesn't mean sharing your entire life story with everyone. Vulnerability is not oversharing, it's selective honesty. It's saying, here's a part of me that matters, and I trust you with it. Of course, vulnerability won't always be met with the response we hope for. Some people might not understand, some might judge, but here's the key. Vulnerability isn't about controlling the outcome. It's about living authentically. And every time we show up as our real selves, we reduce the grip of loneliness, because even if not everyone accepts us, we at least know that the connections we do build are real. In a world where so many are pretending, vulnerability is a revolution. It's the courage to be human in a society that celebrates masks. It's the strength to say, I'm not okay, when everyone else is busy saying, I'm fine. And when even one person responds with empathy, that single moment of truth outweighs 100 shallow interactions. So if you find yourself feeling lonely, ask, what part of me am I hiding? What truth am I afraid to share? Because connection requires being seen, and being seen requires vulnerability. It's not weakness. It's not failure. It's the very courage that turns loneliness into belonging. There is something extraordinary about human connection that goes beyond words, beyond culture, beyond explanation. It's almost invisible, yet we feel it in moments that catch us off guard. A stranger smiles at you on the street, and for a brief second you feel lighter. You sit on a train, exhausted, and someone silently offers you their seat, and suddenly the world feels a little kinder. Or maybe you've locked eyes with someone across a room, and without speaking, you just knew. They understand. That is the invisible thread of humanity. We can't touch it, but it ties us together. It reminds us that, beneath all our differences, we are the same. We love, we grieve, we laugh, we hurt, and sometimes the simple recognition of that shared humanity is enough to soften the sharp edge of loneliness. The challenge is that modern life often distracts us from this thread. We walk quickly, headphones in, eyes down. We scroll through feeds instead of noticing faces. We see categories, stranger, colleague, competitor, neighbor, before we see the person. And when we forget that invisible thread, we feel disconnected not only from others, but from the world itself. Loneliness grows not because people aren't there, but because we've stopped noticing how connected we already are. Think of a time when tragedy struck a community. Suddenly, strangers become helpers. People donate, volunteer, comfort one another. In those moments, we remember the thread. We feel it tugging us toward compassion, reminding us that suffering is universal, and so is kindness. The truth is that thread doesn't only appear in tragedy. It's always there, but it takes awareness to see it in everyday life, in the barista who remembers your order, in the neighbor who holds the elevator, in the child who waves at you for no reason other than joy. These moments may seem small, but they carry weight because they remind us we are not alone. Science even confirms this invisible bond. Psychologists talk about mirror neurons, brain cells that fire not only when we act, but when we see someone else act. When we see someone laugh, our brain mirrors it. When we see someone cry, we feel a tug in our chest. Empathy is not just emotional, it is biological. We are wired to connect. Loneliness, then, isn't natural. It's a signal like hunger, reminding us of what we're missing. But here's the key. To feel this invisible thread, we must be open to it. We must slow down enough to notice. Connection doesn't always come from deep conversations or lifelong friendships. Sometimes it comes from shared humanity in fleeting moments. A conversation with a cab driver, a nod to someone jogging past, helping a stranger pick up groceries they dropped. These connections may last seconds, but they feed the same human need for belonging. The beauty of this invisible thread is that it doesn't require perfection, status, or similarity. It simply requires presence, and when you tune into it, something shifts. You stop feeling like an isolated individual and start recognizing yourself as part of a much larger whole. You belong, not because you've earned it, but because you are human, and that realization itself can soften the heaviest loneliness. So the next time loneliness whispers that you are alone, pause. Notice the small moments of connection around you. Look into the eyes of the cashier, the stranger, the friend. Feel the invisible thread, because even if it can't be explained, it can always be experienced. And in those experiences, loneliness begins to lose its grip. So perhaps loneliness isn't an enemy after all. Perhaps it is a messenger, a quiet reminder that what we truly crave is not noise, not numbers, not endless distractions, but connection, connection with ourselves, with others, and with the invisible thread of humanity that ties us together. We live in a world that teaches us to move fast, to speak loudly, to wear masks, but the cure for loneliness isn't found in more speed or more noise. It's found in slowing down, in listening deeply, in daring to be vulnerable, in noticing the small, silent ways we are already connected. The truth is, you are not as alone as you think. Every smile, every story, every act of kindness is proof of that unseen bond. The more you recognize it, the more it grows. And when it grows, the ache of loneliness begins to soften into something else, belonging. So the next time that emptiness creeps in, don't ask, "Why am I so alone?" Instead, ask, "Where can I notice the connection that's already here?" Because once you do, you'll discover that the connection you've been searching for was never lost. It was simply waiting for you to see it.